You know that feeling, right? That sense of pure joy from a perfect meal. We call it food happiness. But is it really as simple as just tasting something delicious? Well, the science says it's way, way deeper than that. So let's dive into the fascinating story of what's really going on inside our brains and our bodies when we eat. I mean, think about it. What if the sugar rush you get from a donut and that deep, warm feeling you get from a family dinner are actually tapping into completely separate systems in your brain? Because according to the research, they absolutely are. So on one hand, you've got that quick rush. Scientists call it acute hedonic pleasure. It's that immediate, intense, but kind of fleeting high. And on the other hand, you've got deep contentment, or what they call sustained eudaimonic contentment. This is the good stuff, stable, long-term well-being. And our bodies are basically in a constant tug of war between these two paths. Now, to really understand this tug of war, we've got to look at the chemicals behind the scenes. And this story really boils down to two main players, dopamine versus serotonin. Okay, check this out, because this is where it gets really interesting. Look at how these two chemicals work. Dopamine is mostly in the brain, and it's all about wanting. It's the chemical of desire, the hunt, that immediate rush. But serotonin, get this, about 90% of it isn't even in your brain. It's in your gut. And its job is to signal, hey, we're full and satisfied, giving us that long-term good mood. So one is saying go, 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 and the other is saying, you're good. And that dopamine system is no joke. It is incredibly powerful. It's responsible for that almost primal urge you get for those high-reward foods. You know, that craving for something salty, fatty, or super sweet. Yeah, that's your dopamine system kicking into high gear, telling you to go get that instant reward. And this is how it can trap us in a loop. See, hunger kicks off the wanting phase. Then you eat that thing you're craving, and boom, the dopamine system lights up, you feel pleasure. But here is the really crucial part, step 4. That pleasure rush is so intense that it can literally shout down your body's natural signals that are saying, hey, we're full. And that pushes us to eat more than we actually need. Okay, so if dopamine in the brain is all about the quick fix, where does that real long-term happiness come from? Well, for that, we have to look down to your gut, which more and more scientists are calling our second brain. And this is the key concept right here. It sounds a little complex, the microbiota gut-brain axis, but all you need to know is that it's basically a superhighway, a direct communication line between the trillions of little microbes living in your gut and your brain. And the health of the superhighway, which is mostly run by serotonin, is literally the foundation for your mood and long-term well-being. But, and this is a big but, here's where the problem comes in. Our biology, this whole dopamine-serotonin system, evolved over thousands and thousands of years. Modern food design, on the other hand, has learned how to hack the system, creating a massive conflict between that short-term pleasure and our long-term health. And the research points to this one fascinating little glitch in our wiring that we all have. It turns out our senses are just not very good at figuring out how much fat is in our food, especially when there are other really strong flavors involved. Yeah, scientists actually have a name for it, fat discrimination failure. It basically means that food can be loaded up with tons of high-energy fat, but as long as it's also intensely sweet or salty, our senses get totally confused. We can't accurately perceive those extra calories, and we get tricked. And the consequence of that trick is spelled out right here in this quote from the research. This little blind spot promotes passive energy overconsumption. In other words, we eat more than we need without even realizing it. Our body's natural calorie counting system just gets completely bypassed. So, all this brings us right to the topic of comfort food. We all have our go-to, but the reason we reach for it, well, it might not be what you think at all. Let's just ask the question straight up. Is it really about chasing a feeling of pleasure? Or is there something else going on when you grab that pint of ice cream after a really tough day? Now just look at this data. This is fascinating. The expected pleasure, it's actually a pretty weak reason for why people eat comfort food. The real drivers? Dealing with boredom and managing mental overload. So we're not just seeking pleasure. A lot of the time, we're just trying to manage our mental state. So here's the bottom line. We're using these high-reward foods as a tool. It's a coping mechanism. We've learned to deal with being tired, stressed out, or just bored. It's a way to kind of give our brains a temporary break from a demanding task. So how do we break out of that reactive cycle? Well, the research points to a proactive solution, using the act of cooking itself. When you apply this well-being model called PERMA to cooking, look what happens. The source of happiness completely shifts. It's not just about eating anymore. It's about finding that state of flow, building relationships by cooking for other people, and getting that amazing sense of accomplishment when you master a new skill. And that brings us to the final and maybe the most powerful piece of this whole food happiness puzzle. And it has a lot less to do with what's actually on the plate and a lot more to do with who's at the table. Because the research is crystal clear on this. The single greatest amplifier of our gastronomic well-being isn't some rare spice or a fancy kitchen gadget. It's the simple act of eating with other people. And this right here is a stunner. The data shows that how often you eat with other people is just as strong a predictor of your overall happiness as your income or your job status. I mean, just let that sink in for a second. It's that fundamental to our well-being. This quote from the source really says it all, doesn't it? In our crazy busy lives, making time to share a meal isn't some luxury. It is perhaps the single most important thing we can do for our own health and for the health of our communities. So let's bring it all back together. The science shows us these two very different paths. There's the hedonic path, it's reactive, it's temporary, and it's usually an individual experience. But then there's the eudaimonic path, the one that leads to real contentment. It's proactive, it's sustainable, and it is deeply social. So what can we actually do with all this? Well, the takeaways point to a really clear strategy. Prioritize foods with texture that force you to actually slow down. Eat more anti-inflammatory foods to help out that gut-brain highway. Start to reframe cooking, not as a chore, but as a proactive tool for your own well-being. And maybe most importantly, make eating with other people a genuine, non-negotiable priority in your life. It all leaves us with one final thought, really. In this big quest for happiness through food, we spend so much time and energy focusing on recipes and ingredients. But what if the most important ingredient of all isn't something we can cook? What if it's someone we can share it with?